Welcome back to the Lunch Hour Draft Special here on the Believe YouTube channel. I'm Joe Deleone, NFL draft analyst with A to Z Sports. With me is the great Solomon Wilcots, host on SiriusXM's NFL channel, also host of Believe in Bengals here on the Believe Network. Also, former Bengal defensive back and Colorado defensive back. Solomon, I want to talk a little bit about this Colorado program before we get into talking about the Bengals' direction for this draft class, because they are a driving force in the talking points of the beginning of this draft. Yeah. I just want to hear from a guy who's a former player who has been able to see this transformation with Deion Sanders. What has it been like that the general public maybe doesn't see that Deion Sanders has transformed with this team and is putting them in the right direction?
Look, I think over time, I think people are going to look at this pivotal sort of crossroads of college sports, something that was not of Deion Sanders' making, but something that was in the making over time, and due to the poor leadership with the NCAA not literally upholding their position as the governing body of college sports and allowing the courts to rule on something that they really should have taken care of, right? And we're talking NIL, we're talking transfer portal. Coaches have had transfer portal since time immemorial in college sports, right? They could hop and leave from job to job and pursue their hopes, dreams, and aspirations, but a player never could. The coaches could reap the financial rewards of their hard labor and their work if they turned the program around and get new contracts, and players never could. When I played at the University of Colorado, we couldn't even work. Now, these were NCAA rules. We had people in the community who would hire us in Boulder, Colorado, because they take great care of their players. It's a wonderful place to be. But the NCAA said, no, if you're playing football, if you're on scholarship, you can't even have a job. Now, that's un-American, right?
Yeah.
But here we are now, some 30 years later, and it's weaved its way to the courts, and we have NIL, and here comes Deion Sanders, who looks at, the transfer portal like it's college free agency. And so he inherited a team that won one game the year before, and he says, look, what would you do if you were an NFL coach? You would use the free agency of getting as many players you can get to turn over the roster. When I came to Colorado, we, weren't winning games immediately, and took us a few years to turn over the team. But with the transfer portal, you could turn it over more rapidly. And for a lot of people who are traditionalists, Joe, they didn't like it. They didn't like, I don't know if I like what Deion's doing. I don't know if I like what. And you had writers, you had reporters who were attacking him as a coach, who were attacking the program because they didn't like it. Well, that's your preference if you don't like it, but that's not good journalism to attack something that was not of his own making. He entered into a space that allowed him to do things differently, but yet it was all legal, but yet it was all, he was the first, right? To show people this new way of turning a team around. And here's another thing. I'll end on this. He's always been great with young men and helping young people, in so much that he always did it out of his own pocket. When it was unpopular to do so, when people didn't know, he didn't go around sort of waving pom-poms. But knowing him personally, this was something he had always done for young men. He always took young kids under his wing and wanted them to live this great life and have these great opportunities. And that's what led him into coaching, because he wanted to help young people. How many coaches got into it, not for the fame, not for the money, but just to help young people? Deion Sanders is coaching for all the right reasons, and he's doing it the right way. I don't care what anybody else thinks about it, because I know him. I knew him before he was coaching. I knew him when he was a player, knew him when he was in broadcasting. And all while he was doing those things, he was still helping young people. And I just think that now you see the new contract that he has to be the coach at the University of Colorado. He's got a football team that they graduate. They have good grades for the first time in team history. They have an average GPA over 3.0. So this guy is doing wonderful things for our program. Oh, by the way, sells out every single game, every single hotel, Enrollment is up by over 40%. What else do you want the guy to do? He raised the Titanic, for crying out loud. So I could not be more proud of him. I could not be more proud of our program. The kind of young men that he's bringing in are guys who go to class, who do the right things on campus. They treat other people, the student body and professors, they treat them with open arms. So look, we're very happy about the program, but I'm very proud of Coach Prime. He's done a wonderful job at CU.
I think there's also been a lot of misconceptions with this Colorado program, and the growth that he's had has just been so huge. I think that the general direction and the changes, you talked about the enrollment being up, the whole brand itself has grown to this massive level. I think that like we'll see an impact in 20, 30 years, even how much this is going to affect this Colorado school. But I think that one of the biggest misconceptions, Solomon, is that of who Shedeur Sanders, their quarterback this past year, one of the top quarterback prospects in this class, who he is as a young man. Everybody that I've spoken to in draft circles that have had connections to him, who have done their digging, and as they always do in these draft classes on guys' characters, they have all said that he's a great leader. They all said that everybody loves him. They all say that he is a great young man. But after the combine, there are all these rumors, and there's been rumors about, is he too arrogant? Is he too pompous? I think he's confident. I think that he is confident, and it's rubbing some people the wrong way. I just want to get your thoughts. Like, I would assume that you're not buying into this, but like, what do you think about when you hear people claiming that Shedeur Sanders isn't a good leader?
That they don't know what they're talking about. These are the people who buy into stereotypes and myths and fears and phobias, right? And they are, these are the people who would have gathered these powerful women who own their own businesses, right? And marched them over to the town square in Winston-Salem, Massachusetts, right? And burn the witches at the stake because these women have great business minds, and it's a fear, it's a phobia. Oh, it's a problem that we have in society because people grab on to things because it meets their concerns. Where a lot of us are driven by our fears. We don't like to admit that, but we'll grab hold of whatever makes us feel better about what we're afraid of. And you see someone like a Shedeur Sanders who's confident, who's strong, who can speak up for himself, even in the light of a lot of criticism. He knows how to handle it, right? And people, they brace at that. But I could tell you this, because I was interviewing him. He was on the opening drive with us on Sirius Radio, and I was so impressed with him as a young man. I think about all the years I've been covering the NFL draft and players who are 21 and 22 years old and they come out. I rarely have met someone who is mature, who is as strong and as confident. But the thing about being confident and what keeps you from crossing that line into arrogance is just having an ounce of humility, to be able to laugh at yourself and be able to have fun with others and embrace other people. And I asked him about his leadership style and what he enjoyed most about that. And he talked about the fact that, how they grew up. They grew up, everybody know, a family of means. He's lived a great life, right? But his ability to share that with his teammates when he was at Jackson State in Mississippi, right? Where a lot of those kids hadn't even been out of the state, hadn't been out of the areas where they grew up. And they would rent out a hotel in Houston or even in Colorado and other parts. And he would take the entire offense and they would work over the summer. They would stay, they would do sort of like a field trip, when they weren't practicing, or they'd go to state houses for dinner and eat good, play good, and work out. And he did that as a quarterback. And he talked about the things that he learned from Tom Brady and what Tom Brady was teaching him about leadership and about critical moments in game, when to take over a game and when to allow the defense to help him out. But he seems to just understand these things intuitively, and he shares them. He shares the spoils with his teammates. And I remember him talking about the fact that he wasn't happy that some of the CU players or some of his teammates weren't invited to the NFL scouting combine. So he and Travis Hunter got together and said, look, we're going to do an NFL showcase in Boulder. And he said, so since our players can't come to the combine, we're going to bring the combine to Boulder. We're going to bring it on our campus. He did that so that it put the spotlight on those teammates of his that he thought was well deserving of an opportunity to be seen by many of the scouts around the National Football League. And Travis Hunter did it as well. He worked out as a wide receiver, right? But they both, that's forward thinking. That's not thinking about self. That's thinking about others. And that's what the great leaders do. It's what we call a servant leader. How do I help others when they don't have the leverage to be able to do these things? What can I do with the blessings that I have in life to help other people? Shedeur Sanders has that at a very young age. And I think all of us, if we had a son who was that age, who was playing college football, if he had the foresight to be able to help his teammates in that way, we would love that if that was our son. But maybe because it's Deion Sanders' son, maybe other people just don't get it. But I get it. I can tell you that. And I'm proud of him as a young man. I'm proud of him as a leader.
I feel like there's just generally been so much speculation with Shedeur Sanders. And I'm glad that I asked you that, because that's some of the best context that I've been given talking about him, because everybody's just guessing. Everybody is blindly guessing about who he is. And the leadership shouldn't be the question mark. You can question some other things about his style of play and the system he was playing in and all that. But no, you should not be questioning who he is as an individual, because he is going to help reshape a team if they can build around him and start to set up a really good foundation. I want to move on to talking about the Bengals here. You being a former Bengals player and covering the Bengals for Believe, I'd like to help listeners of this channel and fans of the NFL draft understand, like, what are the priorities for the Bengals during this draft? I feel like with the shift of bringing in Al Golden and moving on from Lou Anarumo and seeing Sam Hubbard retire and Trey Hendrickson possibly get moved and traded before the season, during the season, whenever it happens, what do you think has to be priority number one in the first round and in the first few rounds?
Yeah, I think adding playmakers, Joe, on the defensive side of the ball. They've got plenty of playmakers on offense. It all starts with Joe Burrow and obviously Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki and Chase Brown coming out of the backfield. I still think they need to add another running back that gives them some physicality at the point of attack, short yardage goal line, but can still catch the ball out of the backfield. And that's why they bring back a Samaje Perine, because I think that gives them some stability back there with Chase Brown. But to think about it, to have those same or similar playmakers on the defensive side, it all starts with Trey Hendrickson, right? Because this guy has had more sacks than any other player in the NFL over the last 2 years and led the league in sacks last year, right? But yet he's somewhere way down the line when it comes to compensation and his salary. I'm trusting that they'll get that done. He means so much to the team. But now they need to add more of those kind of players on defense. So when they go on the clock with the 17th overall selection, if Jahad Campbell, say from Alabama, is there, he is that kind of player that would fit in the middle of that defense along with Logan Wilson, right? And now if they can find one on the defensive line that's that way, whether it's one of the interior defensive linemen or whether it's another edge rusher or whether it's a linebacker like Campbell, or maybe it's in the secondary with Xavier Watts, who had played for Al Golden at Notre Dame. But it's got to be a real game changer, a real playmaker on the defensive side of the ball. They almost need to get lucky, right? But I think at 17, I think that kind of player is going to be available. And that's what they need to get. If they can get one in the first round and second round, everybody in the NFL better watch out. If they get one in the first round, I think it puts teams on notice. But if they hit it out of the park with two picks in the first or second round, and you get playmakers who can play day one on defense, and they know how to find the ball, and they know how to make plays at critical moments in games, think about that and how much that would change who and what the Cincinnati Bengals are all about. That would be phenomenal.
I really love the Xavier Watts point that you just brought up. I that is one of my favorite projections. If I've done a multi-round mock draft that I've just put out there, like, hey, him ending up with the Bengals makes so much sense. Reuniting with Al Golden, who relied a lot on his defensive backs for success. And Xavier Watts had a insane career over the last couple of years, turning the ball over. And that is the type of playmaker that you're talking about the Bengals currently need at the moment. They just don't have those types of guys. I think with that in mind at 17 overall, to be very frank, the Bengals are in a way, they're a little bit desperate right now. They have everything that they need on offense, not completely, but they're good enough with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They've gotten that figured out. Their offensive line could be a little bit better, but they drafted Amarius Mims last year. On defense, that they're really without important guys. Do you think that desperation could inspire them to maybe even trade up to move up into the top 10 or earlier to go after any of these top defensive linemen?
It should, but that's not their, it's kind of not their MO, right? Like, think about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think you might find some similarities, and the Steelers are one of those teams. And think about it, they're not even here with a quarterback, but they're not panicked. Like, most teams would be panicking if they were, but not Pittsburgh. No, we're going to find a guy, we'll be okay. And they do. They keep winning. Most teams who don't have a quarterback who rotated through 5 different quarterbacks over 2 years, if they didn't have a guy going into the draft, they'd be panic-stricken, but the Steelers aren't. The Bengals are very similar in that fashion, particularly with a player like Joe Burrow at the helm. They know that there's a sense of urgency. To your point, most teams would be sort of desperate. Most teams would be sort of panic-stricken, feeling the need to like overcompensate. Hey, we got to move up. The Bengals are, I think they're fine. I think they believe that they're going to get a player at 17 who's going to fit within the defense. It's going to be of Al Golden's choosing, along with Duke Tobin and the others, and that's going to be a day one starter, and he's going to go right in there. You know, it's ironic because I did ask Xavier Watts when we were at the scouting combine. I said, who are some of the guys that you would model your game after? And he mentioned Jesse Bates was one of his guys that he absolutely loved. I said, oh, my goodness. This sounds like it's almost too good to be true. Here's a guy that sort of models his game after a Jesse Bates, the Bengals should have never let him get out of here. And it's what they're still missing on the back end of this defense. If they could get a safety that finds the ball, that's versatile in his skill set, good communicator, don't let the ball get thrown over his head, but is sort of that guy who can have a high yield in the takeaway department, which is what Al Golden teaches and preaches. But he's also a good communicator that knows the defense. So I think he's a great fit. Now, if Jihad Campbell's there, Xavier Watts is probably going to go with Campbell, and you just pray that Watts is around in the second round. And at that point, you might considering moving up closer, higher in the second round to go get the player like Xavier Watts that you know would be a good fit.
Every year there's always like an unexpected pick that happens in the first round. And sometimes like we spend the whole process projecting this team is going to take this position. This team is going to try and address these specific needs. And right now the Bengals, the recurring theme seems to be edge rusher. It seems to be defensive tackle, linebacker, safety, corner, any defensive position. If there was like an unexpected route that they took an offensive player and everybody is like, whoa, nobody thought that they would go with offense. At that 17th overall pick, what position do you think could be randomly in the cards that no one's talking about?
It would probably be an offensive tackle that they would move to guard, but would give them flexibility and versatility on the line. You know, if you had off like Kelvin Banks or Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, or Will Campbell, someone like that. But I think they want to give Al Golden a player on defense, right? I really do.
Right.
Let's look. They have Mike Gesicki, but you ask yourself at 17 if Ty Warren is there.
Yes.
And I don't think they would do. I mean, I think tight end is sort of the last position of need. But man, that you and I both know more weapons. But that's sort of really outside the box. It's really outside of the box, to be honest with you. So I think at 17, if one of the top corners are there, that would surprise me, because we need a difference maker on the line, whether it's at edge rusher or interior defensive lineman. So they could go in a number of different ways. And that's why I think it's a really good question by you, because I think there's some players there that might, if they're at 17, somebody's going to fall, right? You just don't know who it's going to be. But there's going to be one of those players when you get into the mid-teens that's going to be at that, at one of those positions, given they have needs at every position on defense, every level. Let's just say that. Defensive line, linebacker, secondary. That there's going to be a phenomenal player, right, that has fallen to them right at 17, and it'll be interesting to see which way they go. And if there's an offensive player there that falls there, like a Ty Warren, that'll be also interesting, because it's going to be very tempting to take that best player available, even though you don't have a need there and you have needs elsewhere, pass on those players when the player that's really rated high on everybody's board is going to be sitting there staring them in the face at 17. So, I think it's a really good question, because there's going to be that temptation to go for best available over need. And the real thing is to marry the two up. If you could get the best player available and it also fits a need. But if best player available is Ty Warren, it doesn't fit a need, but you still got yourself a really good football player.
Right. And there's also like this world, you mentioned like Kelvin Banks, Tyler Booker's another guy. Like there's offensive linemen that could slide and be on the board for them. And offensive line's not priority number one, but when you've got Joe Burrow and you want to protect him, if you have a high grade on one of these tackles and he's still there, I think it could be an unexpected consideration by the Bengals. You just don't want to force it. And thankfully for the Bengals in this situation, they have so many needs on defense. Yeah. They can take anybody that they really like at that 17 spot. Yeah. Before we get out of here, I just want to talk about this transition from Lou Anarumo to Al Golden, because this is the biggest move and the biggest change for the Bengals in some time now. Anarumo was considered to be that next up, that guy that was going to be one of the next head coaches that was going to get an opportunity, because he'd done so many great things with this Bengals defense, and they have a down year and they let him go. I've been a Notre Dame guy. I've followed Notre Dame. I root for Notre Dame. And I love Al Golden. I think that he is a tremendous hire, and him already being a part of this coaching staff is significant. But like, what do you think was the biggest shortfalling for Lou Anarumo that he had to be replaced?
Look, I don't know if this was on Lou Anarumo as much as let's go into the 2023 season and you lose both of your safeties. You lose Von Bell as well as Jesse Bates. And now you're trying to plug in young players, or you're trying to get some guys to play. And that growth and development did not take place, right? You struggled on the back end. So now you go get Geno Stone, you bring back, Dax Hill didn't work out at safety, so you move him to corner. And so you bring back Von Bell, you sign Geno Stone in 2024, and it's still, you've got holes all over the place now in the secondary. One might argue it got worse. And Cam Taylor-Britt, who had been a really good player, regressed. And so it was a defense that gave up a lot of points, obviously. And when your offense scores 30 or more points in 8 games, and you lose half of those by allowing even more than the 30 points you scored offensively, something had to happen. And I just think that not getting the production, you saw players regress on defense. You saw Jermaine Pratt regress. You saw Dax Hill gets injured earlier in the season in that Monday night game against Washington. He never plays again. DJ Turner gets injured in the game against Dallas. He doesn't play again. And they went on to win 5 straight games after that. Defense played better, Joe, down the stretch at the end. Trust me when I tell you, they played so against Denver. I thought they gave up a few plays you would not like to see them give up. But, they made a few more plays. But at the end of the day, they wanted to make changes defensively, but not so much that they changed schematically. That's why they go get Al Golden, because remember, he had been with this team in 2021 as a linebacker coach when the team went to the Super Bowl. And he's going to run a very similar style of defense schematically. Hopefully he can get more production out of the secondary defenders and is able to play with younger players and get them on the field sooner and still get production. So that's the hope. And I don't think this was a team that really wanted to go away from Lou Anarumo. I just think they felt like they had to do something, and they had to do something different. And so that's why Al Golden was a good find for them, because it allowed them to kind of split the difference, right? Going to get a new defensive coach to breathe new life into this defense, but without making wholesale changes. And that's why Al Golden, at least as we sit here today, they believe it was a really good transition from Lou Anarumo, who they still have a great deal of respect for, to Al Golden, and looking for improvements there. If he can get the young guy, he can get improvement from Dax Hill, improvement from Cam Taylor-Britt, improvement from DJ Turner. These are guys who are first and second round picks and still playing on their rookie contracts, right?
Yeah.
They've got to get production out of these guys. And it's got to happen, and it's got to happen right now.
Yeah, hopefully that there is this turnaround, because the defense held them back. There's so much potential for this Bengals team. We even saw it when they reached the Super Bowl not that long ago. Solomon, thank you so much for taking the time today. If you haven't already, folks, go check out Believe in Bengals. Subscribe to the Believe YouTube channel. Solomon, if there's anything I'm missing that you want to plug here, please let the folks know, but I appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, don't forget, you can always catch me on Sirius XM NFL Radio Channel 88, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time on NFL Radio. Of course, we have a great lineup of co-hosts and great lineup of guests, players, coaches, general managers. And so we're talking football, NFL football, for 3 hours every single morning. So don't forget to join us. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks, everybody.